Hey guys, just want to give you a quick video on how to do a live stream from a camera to YouTube. There's a lot of ways you can do this. We've been meaning at our church to do a live stream for a while, and this whole coronavirus thing kind of pushed us over the edge, and we already had money set aside or saving up for it, and so we did put some money into it. But here's how we went ahead and did this setup. First, we have our camera, and so we have the Panasonic HC-X1 already that we use for recording our services, and so using it for our live stream was a natural choice. And so what we have to use is this Teradek VidiU Go. This is all it is. It screws onto the top of the camera, and it's a pretty cool thing. And so when you turn it on, it goes ahead and can use Wi-Fi or LAN. We just recently ran a landline to our sanctuary. See if I can get a focus on it. And so what happens is it turns on, and then it goes ahead and it will read. There it is. It's on Wi-Fi. It's got a battery on it. It's got a 3-hour battery once it's charged, and that's pretty cool to get some portability on it. And it says no video, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera on. And what it says here, it will go ahead and detect the video and start saying that it found it. As it's detecting the video, a couple things about it. The particular model I got has HDMI and SDI as imports. We wanted SDI for future proofing, but right now we're just running HDMI because that's what our camera has. It's got these two antennas on it for Wi-Fi, and so that's pretty cool. But again, if you have Ethernet, that's always better. And then it's running directly to the camera through an HDMI output, which can be downsampled. The camera's 4K, but I'm only sending 1080p to the Teradek to help it out. And so now that it's connected, what I can do is I can go on our iPad here. Don't mind the messy desk, but here we're using an iPad Pro. They recommend iPad Pro as a minimum to go ahead and use this device. And you could go directly to YouTube from the Teradek, and that is an option. But what I found is that if we bring it right to the iPad, we can do some pretty cool things. And so, for example, right now, let's put the camera so you can actually see something useful. Point at some books and stuff here. And so I can go ahead and I can click on the video. And so right here is a live stream from the camera. Hello. And what I can do with the app is I have it set up that I can put overlays over it. And so I can go ahead and transition different overlays while we're live, or I can do, right now we have a raw language of the Psalm series that we're teaching, and so I've got that overlay set in. So that's pretty cool. Another feature that I've got set up is a custom stream that's coming from our presentation computer up in the sound booth. And what that does is that it will take the output from Proclaim and send it as a separate camera feed that I'll use a chroma key on. And the chroma key ends up spitting out chroma key ends up editing out the background and makes it so I can overlay lyrics or sermon text or whatever I need to overlay on top of the video. And that way it looks really professional. And so getting that all to work was kind of a headache. And so I'm going to show you how I did that. Step one is obviously getting the Teradek. Getting that was, I think that runs about $1,300. And I've got an HDMI connection. The HDMI does audio as well. And so I'm taking camera or audio off the camera directly to the Teradek, which goes to our stream. And what I end up doing is I have a hard wire from the sound booth as an aux out from our soundboard going to the camera. And so I can mix that aux separately and get a good recording of that. And that's all that you gotta do on the camera. Otherwise, you record as normal. On the app itself, this is called Teradek Live Air. And so if you want to go ahead and add a source, you just push Add Source and add a Teradek device, and I'll go ahead and scan for devices. They have apps available for Android and iPhone that you can go ahead and make your cell phones into additional live cameras. And so that's a really cool feature. I'm thinking about doing like baptism cameras or things like that. You can also add RTMP, custom streams, audio files, video files, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do on here. And so you set that up, and then as far as going on the stream itself, there's broadcast destinations. And so in my case, I've got YouTube as our destination. And so you can go ahead and choose what destination you want. One thing you got to know about this is that at least with this app, if we want to use the iPad as a video switcher, you can only go to one source at a time, unless you want to pay a lot of money. If you want to pay a lot of money, I think it's like $90 a month or so, and you can go to Teradek's core source, and if you use core will transmit it from a live stream to become a multicast, and it'll go to a lot of different sources. Or if you don't want to use core, you can use the RTMP and their services like, what's it called? I forget exactly what it's called, but I'll put a link if you ask for it. There's a lot of different sources that will take an RTMP and then go ahead and push it out to multiple sources, but I'm trying to get the most stability and the most professional product, and in that case, I only want to go to one source directly from the app rather than going to a third party. And so we're choosing YouTube because it has a more neutral audience. A lot of people in our community don't use Facebook right now. And so once I have that signed in, I'm able to manage my destination, go to YouTube, and I can choose exactly what channel I want to send it to, and so it'll synchronize. I guess it wants me to log in, log out. So I'll remove this and start over so you can see how that works. Go ahead and do a YouTube, sign in. Yes, you can sign in. Yes, you can use my account. Yes, I want to go to my Oak Grove YouTube channel. And then I can go ahead and choose my specific channel that I have, and so I can either go to our channel public live stream, or I can schedule one ahead of time. And so both of those options are available, or you can go ahead and create a new event, and then all your people will see it that way. And then all you gotta do is push go live, and it will push out to the platform. So what I'm going to do now, the tricky parts with this setup, getting the Teradek set up and getting it to go to this iPad is actually really, really simple. All you got to do is add your, all you got to do is turn on the Teradek, get it connected to the internet. I'm assuming you know how to do that if you are part of this community. You can do it right on board on the camera if you want to manage the settings. My preferred way is actually, if I scroll down, I'll say here's my IP address. Get some focus on there. There's my IP address, and so what I would do is go ahead and use that IP address, type that into my web browser on a computer on the same network, and then that will allow me to go and set all the settings up. And the main thing, if I'm using the iPad app, is to make sure that I'm broadcasting to the live air on here instead of going directly to a platform. With that, everything's straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out and go up to the sound booth. I'm going to show you exactly how I set up Proclaim as our presentation software, sending overlays to our iPad so that we can mix that in. Alright, so I want to show you on the soundboard how we got the output set up for our audio. It's a PreSonus Studio Live 24, and it has on the board 8 or 10 different auxes, and so we have different in-ears set up for each aux, and then I created an audio out for the video, and so it's hardwired XLR. And what I can do is go ahead and control this mix independently from our mains. And we ended up running a hardwire all the way back to our camera spot, all the way back here. We also had a wireless solution, but as we're trying to eliminate variables and create the best product possible, we went ahead and ran a hardwire. Alright, here I am in the sound booth with our presentation computer. What I have going on is our presentation from last week. We sang Grace Like Rain, and so we went ahead and we have these lyrics all as we normally would. On our main projector, we're working on painting some walls, but on our main projector we have a background set up kind of orangish, and that's cool. That looks great for the normal audience. But you'll notice on our preview window that it's awesomely green, super bright green. And so what I did was I went into the settings for display, and we have 4 different monitors set up. Screen number 1 is this main display that we don't want to use for presentation. Screen 2 is our confidence monitor, and so we project all the way in the back of the sanctuary our confidence monitor. Screen number 3 is slides foreground only. And so that's this monitor. This is so that the person who's running slides knows what is being projected, but it's the foreground only, and that's important, that we'll get to in a second. And then screen number 4 is our slides with all the layers, and that's what's projecting to our front with the beautiful orange background there. And so what we have is this setting right here. It says output transparency color. And so I can choose if I want black, green, or blue. Right now I got it set to green because our current series has a lot of blues in it. And so when I change that setting, what it does is it makes the background on my foreground only monitor be whatever color that is. So I can set that to blue, or I can set that to black or green. It doesn't really matter what color I set that to. I did green again just because a lot of our graphics that we're using right now have blue tones in it, and the software can't chroma key black out for some reason. And so that's what we did. And so when it comes to actually creating the graphics, if you're anything like us when you're actually setting up the presentation, normally you'd go in background and then you would just drop in what kind of color background you want, and that would be applied to everything in that particular content item. And so that's great if that's what you want sent to see up front, but not in the live stream. So right now, in this case, when I stream this to the iPad, only the text is going to be broadcasted and not the reddish orange background. What we did, for example, for our sermons, we wanted to have overlays of different texts and scriptures and quotes that could be seen on the iPad that we would overlay. And so right here we have a foreground item. You'll notice that we have foreground items chosen, and that's because we want all the foreground items to actually go to the camera. And so if I were to go back to preview and select the sermon, you'll notice that on my preview window I do have a background here, and that's just because this picture is labeled as foreground instead of background, and therefore it's being transmitted through. And then the background itself is set to be black. And again, think of it as background for the live audience, and foreground only is what is visible to the live stream. And so over here on the actual presentation, I do have a black background because that's what we have it set to. So that's awesome. We have that set up. Now, how do we actually get this sent to our iPad? There's a piece of software called OBS that you probably have heard of if you've researched anything about live streams. OBS is open source. It is a free program, and it, at least on our computer, isn't terribly resource heavy. And so what I have set up is a display capture. When you first open OBS, you can have all sorts of different sources available to choose from. And so one of the sources is display capture. And so when I set that up, it first wants you to set a name, and so I'll just take display capture 2 for now. And then you can go ahead and take this source. Right now it's pulling monitor number 1. I'm kind of getting this infinity window effect. If I change the display to display number 2, it pulls from this monitor. And so that's what I ended up doing. I basically made our monitor into a camera. Now, one trouble that I was having while I was getting all this set up was that my monitor, my preview monitor, was not actually showing up as an option to use as a display. Previously I showed that I have 4 monitors, right? And so if I look at the back of my computer, super messy, don't use that as an example, but I've got 2 capture cards, or 2 graphics cards. One was, the way it was set up previously, as I had one going to a monitor, one going to a projector for each graphics card. And what OBS apparently does is it can only utilize one graphics card at a time. And so I had to change the setup of the wiring so that both of these monitors were using one graphics card instead of separate. And then once I did that, I was able to select this as a item. So step 2 is to choose where we're streaming to. And so because we're going to be on the same network, all using the same network to do this project, if you choose output and recording, now remember, it would be intuitive to think that we're using streaming as an option right now, right? But in reality, what streaming does is it pushes it online to some source. I'm going to go to the recording mode and do custom output to FFmpeg. Otherwise, it wants to record as like an MP4 or something to my computer. I want to do a custom output to a URL. You can do a file or a URL. And then here's what I did. UDP 192.168.1.133 port 9999. Where did that come from? UDP is a means to transmit footage, and the 192.168.1.133 is the IP address of our iPad. I got it set up to be a static. Well, actually, I didn't yet. I'm planning on getting the iPad set up as a static IP. But if you were to go into settings on the iPad, settings, look at the Wi-Fi, click on our Wi-Fi network. It says here's my IP address. So right now, for example, it's 192.168.1.1.1.5. On Sunday, it was 133, and so it worked. And so right now, if I were to try to transmit this feed to the iPad, it wouldn't work because the IPs are changed. And so what I got to do is go ahead and configure this to be a static IP address. So I'm going to try to do that right now as we speak, actually. And so I'm going to change it to 192.168.1.133 is how I had it configured. And so when I do that, I gotta set the subnet. Default is 255.255.255.0. And then the gateway. To look up my gateway on the network, I'm gonna go to the command prompt and do ipconfig. Come on, camera. IP config. And what that gives me is what my gateway is. And so I'm running 192.168.1.254 right now. So I want to type that in on the iPad. 192.168.1.254. Cool. And so now I got that set up. Go away, Facebook. What that does for me is hopefully sets my IP address to be manual. Of course, why I didn't press save. Cool. So I'm going to do that again. 192. So, going back to my settings for OBS. When you use a UDP output, here's some secrets I found from some research and trying to figure everything out here. When you use UDP for your output, you have to use a container mpegts. Don't ask me why. That's what it has to be. There's all sorts of options it can be. mpeg.ts or mpegts. Bitrate, I'm using 25,000. The default is like in 25,000 kilobytes. Keyframes 250. I could rescale it if I wanted to. The encoder, I'm using an NVIDIA graphics card. I think it's a GeForce something. I don't know what it is. But anyways, it's an NVIDIA graphics card, and so I can use the H.264 NVENC encoder. I don't need any audio being processed, and so I disabled that altogether. And so when I save that, I can go ahead and come down to the settings here and say, okay, I want to start recording. And with any luck, I'm not going to get any errors at all. And it says it is recording. So now I can go back to the iPad. And on the iPad, if I go to my sources, I can go ahead and see on the custom stream that I have now two sources. I have my camera in my office that is still streaming, looking at my bookshelf, and then I also have this overlay which mirrors this. And so check this out. If I were to set this so that we can see everything at once, I can minimize OBS once it's recording, and I can go back to my presentation. And so I can go ahead and choose my lyrics and check that out. What it's doing is it's broadcasting this monitor. And so check that out. If you notice on my camera feed, I've got my mouse there because anything that is on this screen is what's being sent over to the iPad. And so I can go ahead and change all my overlays, and yeah, there we go. So the C.S. Lewis quote, for example, is being sent over and can be put on top of the video. So how do I actually set that up? On the iPad itself, if you go to and edit the source, you have all sorts of settings. You can figure out the delays, stream protocol to get this set up from the OBS. It's the exact same settings. UDP 192.168.1.133. That is the same IP address as what the iPad currently is. That's also the same address that OBS is sending to. And then colon to indicate the port 9999. Doesn't really matter what the port is as long as it's over 2500, I think. I use all nines so that it's super easy to remember. There also is an example down there of what it should be. And so when you're in the app, you can go ahead and customize what the feed does. And so we purchased a setting on here for chroma key. And so what that does for us is that allows us to literally key out, just like a green screen, what the what color I want to take out. And so you'll notice here on the iPad, now that I deselected our green screen, I'm getting the same ugly green that I'm sending from the presentation monitor. I'm also sending to the iPad, and I can go ahead and click on the green and chroma key it out. And it's as easy as that. This slider down here lets you edit the strength of the chroma key intensity. For whatever reason, I'm about a third through, and it's giving me some pretty good results. And so just like that, I've got my chroma key settings set up and ready to go as a source. And so I can alternate between if I want to go to the iPad and my overlay. Now you'll notice that I keep clicking on this, and the default setting is that when I select multiple sources, that it puts a lower right-hand corner miniature version of what I got going on. And so I set up some templates up for myself on the iPad here. And so those templates are right here. And so I can go ahead and click on a template that I made, and it's going to go ahead and set up the overlay to be full screen, or if I just want a lower third for the name of the pastor who's up, or if I want to put the lyrics up. They're all different, and the way that works is I can go ahead and edit the source just like I did before for the chroma keying for the overlay from Proclaim, but this time I set the plus sign, and when I do that, what I can do is literally click and drag the source and put it exactly where I want it. And so if I clear that out and make it something that is actually meaningful to us, now if I edit this source magnifying glass, I can click and drag, and when I do that, you'll notice up top I can move exactly where I have that overlay. And so what I did is just made it look good based on the templates that my pastor set up for us, and then we went ahead and got it to save it as a template. And to do that, it's just down here in these settings to go ahead and push save. For some reason, I don't know why, this app only lets you have 4 templates, but you know what, that's good enough for me. And so the way that we have ours set up is that I have a template for sermon text. Then you notice this one looks kind of goofy, but that's because that's set up for lyrics. So if I were to put a lyric up, in a second it should pop up, and now I've got up on the top of the screen lyrics being transmitted over it. I've got one with overlay with the name's pastor's name, and just one, you'll notice, sorry for the shaky camera, just a logo in the top right corner. And all that's been coming from the iPad itself. And then when I'm ready, I can just go ahead on the iPad and push go live, and that will send it right to my YouTube stream that I set up in the settings. Some other cool things in this app: you can edit the audio, and so if I had audio coming from the computer, I could use that separately. I can set the audio for what's coming from the camera. Right now it's reading just some ambience from the microphone and the camera in my office. You can see different stats on what your inputs are. There's all sorts of cool stuff. Right now, we bought each plugin for the app separately, and we put basically $140 into the app, which sounds really gross, but to get a full switcher with multiple inputs and overlays that's wireless, that's a pretty good price. Live chat is not a feature we bought, and so the ones you're going to want if you're going to try following this as a guide is you're going to want to have, let me see if I can find a spot to see all of them. Yeah, here we are. So if you go in the settings and then you look at general extra features, what you'll find is a whole list of extra features that you can purchase to add onto the app. And so we purchased picture-in-picture and group animations that allows us to lay multiple sources on top of each other. Third live source that allows us to use an iPad or iPhone or Android phone as an additional live camera. And so like baptism cameras or moving shots, action shots, whatever you want to do is that. You can get a fourth and fifth and sixth live source if you want, $10 a piece. Chroma key is essential if you want to go ahead and key out the Proclaim background and then record program. That's so that we can record our live stream directly onto the iPad with all of the overlays and switching already included, so that there's not too much work to do in the post-production. What else? Encoder settings. Right now I got set to do different, or 1080p at 60 frames a second. You can lower it. Right now I think every church in the country is working on live streaming, and so sending out 1080p at 60 frames a second probably isn't the most responsible thing to do. Probably better to share some bandwidth with that. Oh look, there's more extra features you can get. Instant replay. You can create a video buffer that you can play back, so that'd be kind of cool for sports type stuff. Stream chat for $10 if you want to go ahead and on the iPad view all the comments from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch all in one spot. GIF support. Animated GIF overlays. My creative team really thought that it would be cool to go ahead and have animated overlays, and so they bought that. Scoreboard timer clock. We thought that would allow us to, I don't know what he was thinking. I think he wanted to go ahead and have a clock on the screen saying here's how much time we have to before we go live, but that's not what it is. That's really just attached to the scoreboard to go ahead and put a timer or clock for the scoreboard overlay feature. 60 frames a second streaming. I really wanted high quality for this stream, and so I went ahead and purchased that. Custom MP3s if you want to put background tracks. Just be really mindful of copyrights and what you're broadcasting online with that. External streams. This is also an essential feature that you have to have if you're going to be using Proclaim overlays. This allows us to use the mpegts source from OBS on the presentation. So I'm going to show you again on the iPad just exactly how I had this set up, configured to show my overlays, because that's the part that I struggled the most with. There's an earlier tutorial that I found online that shows how to do this. But so you have to purchase the extra feature for, again, the external streams feature that allows us to actually use that source from OBS. When you look at your sources, here's the settings that I'm using for OBS or for Proclaim right now. You have the option to use the RTSP stream protocol. my understanding is, I mean, I'm a pastor first and tech guy second, but my understanding is that that is basically a flash stream, and I couldn't get that to work. I wish I could. Spent a lot of time on it, but I couldn't. The second option is kind of fleshed out right now, but it says mpeg or mpegts right in the center there where I'm focusing. And so I'm using mpegts, and then my protocol is UDP, not TCP, not TCP pull, but UDP. Has to be UDP. That's the only thing that worked for me. And then I went ahead and used my stream URL. That's the exact same IP address of what the iPad currently is running, and colon port number. For ease of memory, port number is 99999 for my case. When you set that all up, it will go ahead and spit out what OBS is broadcasting, and then you have to go in and chroma key it out. And so you push the settings, you have all sorts of options, chroma key, shadows, midtones, highlights, tints, and extras. I'm interested in the chroma key, and then I go ahead and I use the color picker and selected the green I had. And what that does is it allows me to get a nice clean output of my text that's being broadcasted from OBS, from Proclaim in the presentation computer. Save that, and then you can go ahead and go back and forth between your options. Notice top left is a preview window, top right is what's actually being broadcasted online, and so you can play around, or the user can play around with settings here. The first source you pick goes in the background, the second one goes in the top or bottom left corner by default, and again I set some templates up so that I can choose exactly how I want it to appear on the fly. And then once let's say I was putting lyrics on top of my screen right there in my office, I can go ahead and hit transition, and it will nicely fade in the overlay. I hope that all makes sense. If you have questions, go ahead and ask me away. I'll try to be as helpful as I can and share the knowledge that I learned over the last couple weeks. Again, OBS, the settings, just to make that super clear again. General, output, go in the recording setting, custom output URL, UDP, / IP address of the iPad, and then colon the port number. You can make that port number up, just make sure the firewall lets it through. Container has to be mpegts video, 25,000 kilobytes per second is my bitrate, 250 is the default for keyframe interval frames. You can rescale the output if you want to. The default codec that it likes to use is libx264. I found better performance if I say show all, even if it's incompatible, and that allows me to see the whole beautiful list of codecs. And then I'll go ahead and choose the NVEC H264 libx264 codec. Again, I don't understand the technology, what makes them all different, but that's the one that works for me. And then I don't want any audio being transmitted, and so I disabled the audio encoder. Then you hit record, and then it'll send it out. And so for my normal video team, we use my teenagers from the youth group to do our switching for us. And so when they show up on Sunday morning and they are here to work on Proclaim, our staff will go ahead and make the Proclaim presentation as normal. I made a note on the camera on this monitor saying, hey, this looks different, it's green. It used to just be a mirror of what was on the projector. But for obvious reasons, I needed to take the background out and make it keyable with the chroma key plugin. And so I just made sure I communicated, hey, this looks different, it looks green, you might think there's a problem with it, but there's not a problem, this is how it's supposed to look. And then the only other step they had to do is go ahead and go on OBS, open it up, and I created a profile, Proclaim to OBS.Ipad as a profile with all the settings they need. And then all they have to do is push record, start recording, and then minimize it, and they carry on exactly how they were trained already to go through our presentation. When they're done with the service, just go in back to OBS, say stop recording, and move on with your life. Yeah, so I talked about the Teradek, I talked about the audio, I talked about overlays from Proclaim, I talked about the iPad app. Let me know what questions you have, if you have any problems with anything. We can do this. It's a long season right now with coronavirus going around, and who knows how long this is going to last for. And so let's work together and do the best we can for the ministry.